Hey everyone, Primal here, and I am coming to you hot with a new guide to a pretty old comp that I think has some new tricks associated with it that you should be aware of, and the comp is Vanguard Mystic. So Vanguard Mystic is actually one of my favorite comps to run. It's one of the comps that I'm best at, and I wanted to show you some tips and tricks on how to run it, as well as go in depth for those of you who are unfamiliar with the comp in general, because I think there are a lot of different positioning and itemization options that a lot of players miss and have a big difference in the outcome of your Vanguard Mystic game. So without further ado, let's get into it. Okay, so this is one variation of Vanguard Mystic, and you're going to note that it actually has 6 Vanguard and 2 Mystic. Now, in order to understand why there's 2 variations of Vanguard Mystic, we have to sort of look at the meta. So the meta right now involves a lot of Shaco players, involves a lot of physical damage like Jhin carry, etc. So you're going to actually want to run 2 different variants of Vanguard Mystic. The first one is 6 Vanguard, 2 Mystic. So pretty straightforward. You run 6 Vanguards, you get a ton of armor, right? You get 1,000 armor on all your Vanguards, which is insane. Even a Last Whisper Jhin will have a ton of problems dealing with that. And you run 2 Mystics, so you still get 50 magic resistance across the whole team. And Cassiopeia is going to be your primary damage carry. The other variant is 4 Mystic, 4 Vanguard. Right? So with a 4 Mystic, 4 Vanguard variant, you're going to be running more magic resist instead of the extra armor. And the reason you're going to be doing that is because late game, when you get to the very late game, like stage 5, most of the damage is going to convert over to magic damage for a lot of comps. So like Darkstar comps, even if they run Jhin, at that point in the game, they're going to be doing things like adding a Xerath with Death Cap or Rage Blade, and it's a lot of magic damage. So you're going to want to have both variants in mind and know how to play both and actually switch between them really fluidly, sometimes round by round. And there's actually a VOD on my YouTube of the Cloud9 qualifier event that I advanced in, which felt great, where the first game of that qualifier, I was actually switching between 6 Vanguard and 4 Mystic based on who I thought I was going to face next. Now that's pretty advanced, and it involves a lot of scouting, but it's really, really critical to going 5th with Vanguard Mystic versus going 2nd or 3rd or maybe even a 1st. Although it is kind of hard to take a 1st with this comp, it is a very consistent top 4 comp if you learn how to play it well. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the principles of the comp and how to decide whether to go Vanguard versus Mystic. So Cassiopeia is your primary carry. That doesn't change regardless of what variant you're running. And the way Cassiopeia works is she has a really, really low mana pool, right? So you're going to be looking to have her continuously cast. And the cool thing is about Cassiopeia is that every time she casts, she will attempt to target a unit she has not already infected, right? So that means if she goes after, let's say, a big tank like a Gnar, she's not going to immediately cast again and hit the Gnar. She's instead going to hit the Wukong who might be next to him, meaning that she spreads her damage across a team. Now, what this means is that when you have a really beefy front line that survives a long time like Vanguards, it allows Cassiopeia to gradually infect the entire enemy team. So fights with Vanguard Mystics are going to be long. They're going to be wars of attrition, where the most important thing is for your team to stay alive long enough for Cassiopeia to infect the entire enemy team and do a ton of damage over time to them. And it's really, really important to keep Cassiopeia safe. So let's talk about the strengths and weaknesses of this comp overall. I think this comp is really, really consistent at making top 4 because it just has really high resistances, and there are certain matchups that you'll just automatically win if the enemy doesn't have a Last Whisper or they don't have a Janna. It's also pretty easy to play overall. The positioning is really important, but it's not a comp where there's too many pieces that you have to worry about manipulating. It's primarily about moving around your Cassiopeia and just scouting for infiltrators and making sure that she's on the opposite side of infiltrators ideally. Or you can do a positioning like I'm showing right here, where she's sort of tucked behind the Vanguards, and we'll get to positioning and why this makes sense later in the guide. In terms of weaknesses of the comp, so it has a really, really narrow win condition, in my opinion. And that win condition is either I guess there's 2 win conditions. It's either hitting Thresh with a really, really strong bench, ideally Thresh 2 with a really strong bench, like extra Sorakas, Lulus, Urgots, etc. Or hitting Cassiopeia 3. Cassiopeia 3 can single-handedly win you the game if you hit her and you can keep her safe. But it's not very consistent to be able to hit a Cassiopeia 3. And if there's multiple Vanguard Mystic players in the lobby, you're not going to be really hitting Cassiopeia 3 very often. Additionally, if you position poorly, the comp is really susceptible to infiltrators. Again, I think with good positioning, you can play around it, and we'll get to that later in the guide. But it is positioning dependent because you're relying on a single carry basically to do all your damage. The last weakness is that it's incredibly item dependent. You cannot run this comp and expect to succeed without a blue buff. Blue buff is absolutely essential, and unfortunately in this meta, tier is highly contested because it's used for Vanguard Mystic, it's used for Teemo comps, which are back in vogue. It's also used for Syndra comps, which are pretty popular right now. So if you don't have tier, at least one tier, probably before end of stage 2, you probably shouldn't be running the comp. Okay, cool. So let's talk a little bit about itemization for this comp. So we already talked about blue buff, and blue buff is really important because Cassiopeia has a really small mana pool, meaning that if she has blue buff, she's just going to be continuously casting and infecting the enemy team as quickly as possible. Arguably, the second most important item here is actually Ionic Spark. The reason being, when you face people who have magic resist, let's say it's another Vanguard Mystic, and often there's 2 Vanguard Mystic players per lobby, because all of your damage is magic damage essentially, if you don't cut their magic resistance, you're going to have a lot of trouble cutting through their front line and eventually killing their team. So Ionic Spark is arguably the second most important item. I would say maybe 2A, 2B, along with Morello's. Morello's is really, really good on Cassiopeia. It adds true damage to your team, so even if someone does have a lot of magic resistance, at least you're going to be doing something to them. And the amount of damage it will do over the course of the fight is crazy, because the way Morello's works is it does damage over time, and those fights are going to last a long time. So Cassiopeia is going to infect different units with Morello's, and they're all going to be taking 25% of their health over time. So Morello's is super, super good on Cassiopeia. The best damage item in slot without a doubt. And then last and least, I would say, is Guardian Angel. I really like Guardian Angel on Cassiopeia. I've seen people build Rapid Fire Cannon on Cassiopeia. I think that's sort of outdated. Rapid Fire Cannon made a lot of sense when no one was running infiltrators in their lobbies, and you would want Cassiopeia to be out of range of like Gnar and other units who are in the front line who could disrupt her. And it would keep her in backline, and she wouldn't move. She'd just be basically an artillery cannon. However, in this meta, where Shaco is so popular and Fizz is so popular, you actually don't want her to have Rapid Fire Cannon because you want to tuck her away in a corner like this. So that in an example, I'll show you an example of a fight. You'll have infiltrators jump to the back, and no matter what, Cassiopeia won't be targeted if she's put on the second row on the extreme left or right. So you can see in this fight, they jumped out to Lulu. Lulu ulted them. Right, it's a shame that we lost our Lulu in this fight, but much better than our Cassiopeia getting targeted. And arguably, if Lulu's hitting a bunch of infiltrators, that's a Lulu well spent. Okay, cool. So these are the core items. In terms of other items that I think are really good in this comp, I think Shojin's is amazing on Soraka because, again, the fights are lasting super long. So Soraka, especially at 2, is going to get multiple heals off, right? And that's adding even more health to your absurdly tanky team. So even one Soraka ult can be game-changing. If she's getting 2 or more ults off, it often means you just auto-win the fight there. Another really, really good item is Guardian Angel. So Guardian Angel is awesome because when you have Ionic Spark, you want Ionic Spark to last as long as possible. And of course, when the Ionic Spark carrier dies, the Ionic Spark debuff, which is cutting magic resistance of the enemy team in half, dies along with it. So getting GA Ionic, ideally on Jace, is a really potent combo, and it also allows Jace to get multiple ults off, and he's a formidable secondary carry in his own right. And in fact, I wouldn't say this is necessarily a typical win condition, but occasionally you'll have a chance to 3-star Jace, and he can straight up carry the whole game. If you manage to 3-star Jace, but it's not usually something that you're going to be going for. So let's talk a little bit about the 2 variants and how to know to switch between them. Okay, so this is the 6th Vanguard variant, right? And basically, the trade-off you're making is that you're adding a ton of armor to your front line, but it's only your frontliners, right? Only the Vanguards themselves get armor, and you're losing a lot of magic resistance, 70 magic resist. I would say, generally speaking, stage 3 is a good time to run 6 Vanguard, right? So if you're, or sorry, not stage 3, stage 4 is a good time to run 6 Vanguard, because that's a time when a lot of magic damage carries aren't fully online yet. But the most important thing to keep in mind when you're considering whether to run 6 Vanguard is just what other comps are people running. So let's talk about some of the meta comps, right? Darkstar is a meta comp. Darkstar is a comp that usually has Shaco and Jhin carrying, and then very late into the game, like stage 5 or 6, is going to have Xerath carrying. 6 Vanguard is very, very good versus that comp. There's a point at which they hit Xerath, and when they hit Xerath, especially Xerath 2, Xerath starts to outdamage the Jhin and the Shaco, sometimes even Jhin and Shaco combined. At that point, it's worth making the trade-off of 6 Vanguard and going down to 4 Vanguard and adding 4 Mystic instead. But I would say most of the stage 4 and like part the way through stage 5, you're going to want to have 6 Vanguard instead of 4 Mystic. It's like jumping back and forth between these is like really confusing. So that's one comp that you're going to want to be mindful of. Have they hit their Xerath or not? If they have hit their Xerath, then it's time to start considering Mystic. Otherwise, you're going to want 6 Vanguard. Versus Teemo/Jhin comps. Usually in this meta, people are going to be stacking Teemo with blue buff and Morello's or Death Cap, and then maybe one other item. Versus Teemo, you absolutely need 4 Mystic. If you don't have 4 Mystic, what's going to happen is your front line is just going to get blown up and, like 2-shot by the Teemo, because he will always ult the units who are closest to him, right? So really, really important that when you're facing a Teemo person, or you think you're going to face a Teemo person, you tech in 4 Mystic. Another meta comp is Cybers. It's not as popular as it used to be, but Cybers is still really good. 6 Vanguard is pretty much an auto win versus Cybers. It's very, very difficult for Cybers to contest with 6 Vanguard. So if you do like this sort of positioning, right, you have a Leona in the back, so that Echo jumps there, and you keep your Cassiopeia safe, you're going to beat 6 Cybers like 9 times out of 10, even if they have a Last Whisper on them, particularly if you have the right items going for you. So Cybers, you definitely want to run 6 Vanguard. If you think you're going to be facing a Syndra comp, it's pretty obvious you should be running 4 Mystic, right? Because that's tons and tons of magic damage. And then if you think you're going to be facing another Vanguard Mystic, right, another Snake player, you're going to want to run 4 Mystic again, right? Because the primary source of damage is going to be their Cassiopeia. So it's really important that your front line is able to withstand their Cassiopeia just as well as their front line is able to withstand yours. So that's a little overview of when to run 6 Vanguard over 4 Mystic and vice versa. Most important thing is you should keep the spare units on bench ready to swap in, right? So generally, if you're running 6 Vanguard, you're going to be running Poppy and Leona, but if you're running 4 Mystic, you're going to be dropping Poppy and Leona, and instead of replacing them with Karma and Lulu or Bard or whoever. So don't go ahead and sell Leona and Poppy, and definitely don't itemize them if you know you're going to be running this build. Keep them on your bench and swap them in and out. It's going to cost you some econ, right? So you should be scouting and assessing the state of the lobby. You might reach a point in the game where 6 Vanguard is never going to be played because everyone remaining is mostly magic damage. That does happen. At that point, you can sell Leona and Poppy, but otherwise, you really want to keep them, because what really sucks is getting in a position where you're top 2 and then you realize the last guy has all physical damage and 6 Vanguard would have won you the lobby, right? So definitely don't want that happening. Okay, cool. So let's talk a little bit about early game. So early game, the most important thing, and let's actually remove all, let's actually go to a fresh board for the sake of demonstration here. Early game, the most important item to get is blue buff. But who can carry your blue buff? So these are the best units to carry your blue buff. Ahri is exceptional blue buff user, right? Because she has a really low mana pool and she will discontinually cast. Ziggs is another exceptional blue buff user. And finally, TF, I would say, is not as good as these others, but TF is a fine blue buff user as well. So you're going to want to look out for these guys. And then you're just going to want to build around them. A good example of a strong opener here is something like Ari plus Leona plus Poppy, and then maybe you get a Zoe, right? And this gives you 2 Vanguard, 3-star Guardian, meaning Ari, especially if she has a blue buff already, is going to be acting as a battery for her Poppy and Zoe. You get a nice tanky front line, and then you just want to worry about making sure your Ari is really safe from infiltrators, so constantly reposition. Another positioning you can do is if you're concerned about infiltrators and blitzcrank, you can do this, right? You just backline all your units. This is actually a good standard positioning for most situations. With Ari, it's not awesome because Ari, she has a range on her ult, right? So her ult might not hit the backline units. But if you're not sure who you're going to be facing and you're concerned about infiltrators, this is a really solid positioning. Let's look at Ziggs. So if you're running Ziggs, you can run Ziggs with, say, Malphite. Where's Alawi? Or you could run Ziggs with Malphite, and let's put a blue buff on this guy here. And Malphite, Zed, and Alawi. That's a really, really strong opener as well. And you might want to put your Malphite up here and tuck Ziggs in the corner. And just position on the side where their carries are so that Zed jumps to the back. And maybe you'll put your Alawi here. Or you can even put Alawi back here if you're concerned about a blitz pull or infiltrators, right? So that's another really strong opening. And then TF, I mean, it's kind of similar to what you do with Ari. You have TF here. Let's say you got a Zoe. And then you also have a Poppy and a Leona. And this is a really good standard positioning to do because TF's ult is the entire map, so it's not a big deal that he's back here. So a really good, safe default positioning if you're just not really sure what to do. And then when you get into stage 2, you just want to continue to accumulate Vanguards on the way, right? Because you're going to want literally every Vanguard you see you should be buying, right? And a nice stage 2 board might look something like this. So you got Mordekaiser in, maybe you got a Nautilus, maybe you got lucky and you hit Jace, so you drop Poppy for Jace and you put Poppy on your bench. And this can be a pretty decent mid game if you have, especially if you have a blue buff here. And generally speaking, in stage 3, most people are going to be still heavy on physical damage, so 4 Vanguard continues to overperform in that stage. Let's talk a little bit about positioning now. So now you understand some good early game boards to get you there. So positioning, if you're running not to overcomplicate things here, it's pretty simple at the end of the day. Keep your Vanguards in front. Keep your Cassiopeia ideally near your Jace, right? Because you want her to infect units who are going to have reduced magic resistance first, right? So you ideally want to keep her on the side that Jace is on. And you want to keep her, you can keep her back here, but she's going to end up running to the front line anyway. So what I actually like to do is constantly move her between here and here, right? And fake out infiltrators. This also keeps you safe from blitzcranks. The only thing you want to watch out for is like something like a Nico who could be here and has an ult that reaches second row, or maybe a Gnar. But again, Cassiopeia has such short range that she's going to be running up anyway, so it's actually not a big deal to have her here, especially if she has a Guardian Angel on her. And then in terms of other positioning things to keep in mind, you want to keep your least valuable Vanguards on the second tile here, because often people will put their carry right here. So this Nautilus and Poppy will get focused first. You don't want your Jace getting focused as much. And you want Wukong not dead center. You want him off to a side. Ideally the side where the carries are. So if they're over here, you want him to be here so that he's more likely to spin into the corner and disrupt their backline. But don't put him in the middle, because otherwise he's going to have a far travel time and you might not end up ulting anyone on the sides. And then Jace's positioning, try to keep him near Cass. As long as he's not here or here, he'll generally be fine. Additionally, I think Soraka is really valuable. Even without a Shojin, she's going to get a lot of heals off just because the fights are long if you keep her safe. So if you invest in good Soraka positioning, she'll get a ton of heals off and possibly win you the fight single-handedly. Same thing when you're running the 4 Mystic variant. Just keep your Cass safe, keep your Soraka safe. Keep a Karma in the corner to act as blitz bait and to tether your Cassiopeia. Alternatively, if you have a Shojins, you might want to even tether your Soraka, especially if you already have a Guardian Angel on Cass. so she gets the additional attack speed and gets even more ults off. And then Thresh can be here once you hit him, and I like Lulu as well, being back here to hit infiltrators, because oftentimes infiltrators will jump on Lulu, and if it's not like a fully stacked godlike Shaco, she'll just ult them and delay them and waste their time, right? Alternatively, if you really want to, you can play Lulu 2. If you have Lulu 2, you can put her front line. But when I have Lulu 1, I usually just put her back here. And I just realized I skipped a section here. But let's talk about level 9, because this is actually a level 9 comp right here. This is, right? Yeah. Oh, yeah, this is embarrassing. I can't count. 1, 2, 3. But yeah, this is level 9. So this is a level 9 comp that you're seeing for the 4 Mystic variant. And in fact, let me show you what you would do at level 9 if you're running 6 Vanguard. It's really, really complicated. So bear with me. It's not complicated at all. Just put in Thresh. Just put in Thresh. And have a good bench for Thresh to play off of, right? And if you're hitting something like a Lulu 2, you should play Lulu 2 over Soraka, but assuming you have Soraka 2 and you don't have a Lulu 2, you should play Soraka over Lulu every time. And Thresh, you want to have a bench consisting of units like Urgot, Sorakas, Lulus, even additional Vanguards as fodder, because they're going to be really tanky, to prolong the fight even longer and give Cassiopeia even more time to get her ults off. The nice thing about Thresh in this comp in particular is because the fights are so long, he will often get multiple ults off even at level 1 to pull in multiple units there. So yeah, that's pretty much it, guys. This is a really, really strong comp that it's not going to be disappearing anytime soon. I think it's really essential that you learn it and play it when it's handed to you. I think it's kind of a free top 4 if you know what you're doing and you get the blue buff at minimum. In terms of how to top 1, again, Cassiopeia 3 is one win condition, but you're generally going to be looking for her at 8, and only if you're not facing any other Vanguard Mystic players. If it's a single other person with a Cassiopeia 2, I wouldn't even bother. But more typically, you're going to be trying to go 9 and throw in this Thresh and getting a good bench. And then at 9, maybe you have a good fortune to hit Cassiopeia 3. The reason why you would usually want to stay at 8 if you're looking for Cassiopeia 3 is because it costs a lot of money to go 9. And if you're spending all that money at going 9, you're probably not going to have enough money left over to go for a Cassiopeia 3. So yeah, that's basically it, guys. Final note, if there's no infiltrator players in the lobby, it's totally fine. Just put Cassiopeia back here and put Soraka here. Cassiopeia is going to walk forward eventually, but it might prevent her from getting hit with an ult, a frontline ult that goes off immediately at the start of the fight, because there'll be a little bit of a delay. And no matter where she is, if she has blue buff, she'll cast immediately at the start of the fight. So her attack range is not the same as her cast range, which is great. And then Soraka has she'll never run forward because of her attack range. Or not never, but she won't run forward from here. So you can place her back here if there's no infiltrator threats. All right, guys. So that was a lot of information I just dumped on you. There's more in the written guide that is going to be linked in the description. Let me know if with a comment how you like this guide. If there's any other details you want me to go into in the future. There's also going to be a gameplay video associated with this that you can check out with the Cloud9 Qualifier Game 1 that I really encourage you to check out. Until next time, I'm Primal, and I am happy to bring you this guide, and I hope you had a good time watching this video. Peace!